All right, this is part 2. All right, so prior to Darwin, people believed that species had remained unchanged since their creation. And this is kind of the basis of creationism. They were all created by God. So anything that contradicted this was quite significant and quite controversial. So during his travels on the Beagle, that's the name of the boat, great name, of course, he observed and collected all kinds of specimens, from plants to animals, drew things in his book, and just basically kept notes and saw various kinds of adaptations due to different diverse environments. He actually had, as you know, quite a significant, some significant observations on the Galapagos Islands near South America, where he kind of formulated and started really asking his true questions about why there were these differences. And he began to perceive these adaptations and connecting them to their specific environments, and thought that they were all closely related. So later, as people have gone back to the Galapagos Islands, we can see, for example, Darwin's finches, which he's famous for taking observations of, looking at the various beak sizes, beak shapes, color patterns, and so on, and how they were adapted for their different environments, and specifically their food source. Now, originally in 1844, he wrote a long essay, kind of the precursor to the book, and because of the uproar that he thought it would cause, he was very hesitant. But then in 58, Wallace sent Darwin an essay or manuscript suggesting the same principles that Darwin had written up from years before, and Darwin started freaking out that someone else was going to get credit. So Darwin very quickly finished his book, The Origin of Species, and published it before Wallace could. But they basically had the same ideas. Darwin gets all the credit now. So The Origin of Species is the idea that evolution explains life's unity and diversity, and the disruption or the cause of changes is by natural selection. He used the word descent with modification, and said that all organisms are related through some common ancestor. He, in fact, did not use the term survival of the fittest. That was a newspaper reporter who made that up, so don't attribute survival of the fittest to Darwin. And in fact, survival of the fittest is not accurate, because it doesn't matter if you survive, it only matters if you make babies. So here we have a branching diagram. This is called a cladogram. Here's the common trunk, the common ancestor of all these different species. And the youngest twigs represent, here's the youngest twigs at the top, represent the most recent divergence between these groups and similarities. The closer they are together, the more similar they are. So Ernst Mayr actually has looked into Darwin's theory and made 3 inferences on 5 observations. Okay, so he said, observation number 1, for any species, the population size would increase exponentially if everyone that was born reproduced successfully. There's observation number 1. Number 2, even so, populations are going to be stable in size. There might be some seasonal fluctuations, but populations are stable in size. Number 3, resources are limited. So based on these 3 observations, Mayer's first inference was that production of more individuals than the environment can support will actually cause a struggle for existence, or make it difficult for some to survive. Thus, only some of the offspring will survive. Observation 4, members can vary in their characteristics. No 2 are alike. And observation 5, this variation is inherited from one generation to the next. And thus his next inference, survival depends on these inherited traits. It depends on what they receive from their parents. Those who get traits that increase their probability of surviving and reproducing are more likely to leave offspring. And then the last inference, the unequal ability of individuals to survive and reproduce will lead to a gradual change in population as certain things are favored over others. So that's natural selection. Here we have what's considered artificial selection, where man essentially intercedes and controls who mates with whom. So for example, here we have the wild mustard seed, and this is the actual ancestral species that man used and chose how to cross-pollinate for certain characteristics to create broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and kale and so on. These are all from the same plant. They just chose to select for different traits that they favored. So that's artificial selection. Natural selection, of course, is differential success in reproduction. Some are more successful, some are less. And it's due to interaction between the individuals themselves and their environment. So natural selection can cause various changes over time due to their adaptations, and if the environment changes, new adaptations can be favored. Here, for example, you see a praying mantis, a flower mantid, in amongst these orchids, the same family as this mantid, but looking very different, of course. And we'll take a pause here.